The National Desk, America's News, now.
This week on the National Desk, new questions in the investigation into Hunter Biden's business dealings. The connection to energy in Ukraine, some are calling corrupt. Then, the closed case now cracked back open.
The initial autopsy cited the cause of death as undetermined, and there were suspicious circumstances.
Buster Murdaugh in the hot seat after the body of his former classmate now autopsied for the second time. Plus, dating app dangers.
Violent sexual predators use dating apps as hunting grounds for vulnerable victims.
The new warning for those looking for love online. And later, AI impact. The fact-check team digs into the debate. Will AI help or hurt American jobs?
From the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. We're happy you're with us. On this weekend edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week and look ahead at what to expect, starting with the 4 big stories we've been following all week. Arraignment aftermath, supporters and opponents weighing in on the criminal charges against former President Donald Trump, plus school sports debate. The White House pushing back on new state restrictions on transgender athletes. And later, Holy Week horror, the startling new report alleging a pattern of sexual abuse in the Archdiocese of Baltimore. But first, we begin with trouble in Tennessee. Lawmakers expelled from the State House for their role in protests following the Covenant school shooting.
I hereby declare Representative Justin Jones of the 57th Representative District expelled from the House of Representatives of the 113th Assembly of the State of Tennessee.
That was the Tennessee House of Representatives officially expelling Democratic lawmaker Justin Jones after he participated in gun reform demonstrations after the Covenant school shooting. Fellow Democrat Justin Pearson was also ousted later. Protesters packed the state capitol, you can see here, to oppose the removal of those lawmakers. GOP lawmakers filed resolutions against the men, arguing they intentionally brought disorder and dishonor to the House of Representatives. A third representative, Gloria Johnson, also up for expulsion, but remained in her position by a single vote. Johnson slamming her colleagues afterwards, warning democracy was at risk.
To the nation, keep watching. We are losing our democracy. We need to make sure that we stomp out this march to fascism. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and we cannot forget that. Eyes on everything, folks.
Republicans controlled the Tennessee House by a wide margin with 75 members to Democrats' 23. Developing now, President Biden's administration has released its long-awaited report on the widely criticized fall of Afghanistan. Here are the highlights of the 12-page after-action review. It defends President Biden's decision to order a complete withdrawal while acknowledging evacuation started too late. The report states the president was, quote, severely constrained by the decisions of his predecessor, Donald Trump. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby saying President Biden inherited a bad situation.
You got to look at when he came into office, what he was walking into. He didn't negotiate with the Taliban. He didn't invite the Taliban to Camp David. He didn't release 5,000 prisoners. He didn't reduce force levels in Afghanistan to 2,500. And he didn't have an arrangement with the Taliban that they won't attack our troops. He came in with a certain set of circumstances he had no ability to change.
According to the report, the president followed recommendations from his military commanders in executing the withdrawal. Right now, a new report is prompting calls for stronger ethics rules for the Supreme Court. Left-leaning ProPublica reporting Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has been illegally accepting luxury gifts for decades, accepting luxury vacations from billionaire Republican donor Harlan Crow without reporting them in his financial disclosures in violation of federal law. Justice Thomas did respond to the allegations Friday, describing the trips as personal hospitality from close personal friends that he was advised did not require disclosure.
Our base is very energized and angry by seeing this political persecution, not just of him, but of Republicans across the spectrum. Every candidate running against President Trump has said they think this is an overreach. I think this is unifying our party against the woke Democrat Party.
And that reaction coming in from the Republican National Committee after former President Trump's arraignment in connection to hush money payments. How strong is the case against him, and what should we expect in the weeks and months ahead? The National Desk, Christine Frizzell, explains.
That show of support Tuesday night for former President Donald Trump matched in part with reaction from legal scholars, calling the case against him weak, politically motivated, and unprecedented.
I challenge you to come up with a single case in the history of the New York DA's office in which a person was indicted for failing to disclose on a corporate form the fact that he paid hush money to cover up an adulterous affair.
The alleged hush money payments and falsifying documents, though, will likely be easy to prove, legal experts say.
The harder one to prove is that he did it for the purpose of violating federal election law. And that, of course, is what converts it from a misdemeanor into a felony.
He and others argue this is where the greatest challenge lies.
And it's a particular challenge legally because, of course, that's not a statute within his jurisdiction.
But District Attorney Alvin Bragg insists he has the evidence to prove his case, which centers around a, quote, catch and kill scheme to suppress negative stories about Donald Trump in order to influence the 2016 presidential election to benefit his electoral prospects.
Why did Donald Trump repeatedly make these false statements? The evidence will show that he did so to cover up crimes relating to the 2016 election.
Some now calling for the case to be moved out of Manhattan. Attorney Alan Dershowitz arguing Alvin Bragg simply carried out a promise he made when running for office to, quote, get Trump. Also the title of Dershowitz's book.
Now he's going to have a jury consisting of people who voted for him on the platform of getting Trump. Is that justice?
These questions of justice now loom large as Donald Trump navigates a new legal landscape and a presidential campaign. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Taking a look over the White House, where the Biden administration is pushing to stop schools and colleges from placing certain bans on transgender athletes. The plan released Thursday saying the proposed rule would establish that policies violate Title IX when they categorically ban transgender students from participating on sports teams consistent with their gender identity just because of who they are. Critics say the plan threatens the protections that biological women receive under Title IX.
It violates everything Title IX was supposed to protect. For more than half a century now, Title IX has stood to protect the rights of all students, including the right of women and girls to compete fairly in sports.
Right now, more than a dozen states have bans covering at least high school sports. The White House's proposal is under a 30-day public comment period. Right now, Maryland's Attorney General is accusing Catholic Church officials in Baltimore of covering up more than 600 cases of child sex abuse. The AG is naming specific priests he claims either took part in or had knowledge of the abuse. He says some of the victims were targeted multiple times over the years. A statement from Baltimore Archbishop William Lori doesn't deny the allegations. He says in part it is difficult for most to imagine that such evil acts could have actually occurred. For victim survivors everywhere, they know the hard truth: these evil acts did occur. A surge in mass shootings this year, adding fire to the debate over policies regarding firearms. Earlier this week, the fact-check team dug into the details of permitless carry laws across the nation.
With a new law going into effect July 1st, Florida will become the 26th state to allow permitless concealed carry. That's despite a University of North Florida poll that found that only 21% of people in that state support carrying a concealed gun without a permit. I'm back with the fact-check team tonight. Governor Ron DeSantis signing that into Florida law yesterday. Janae, where else is this allowed?
So, Eugene, more than 24 states allow permitless concealed carry. Now, we should note most of them are red states: Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Wyoming, Mississippi, and and Oklahoma, just to name a few. Now, North Dakota allows permitless carry, but it's only for residents, and Nebraska could be the next state to allow this.
And meantime, in Florida, some gun rights advocates saying that this new law doesn't go far enough.
Right. So check out this tweet from former Florida lawmaker Anthony Sabatini. He says the bill allows permitless carry, but does not allow for open carry. Big win for woke Disney, huge loss for conservatives. Now, according to World Population Review, 37 states with varying restrictions allow people to open carry handguns without a permit.
Just last week, 3 children and 3 adults were killed at a school shooting in Nashville. Renewed calls for stricter gun laws across the country. This right now is the complete opposite of that. Courtney, any hope for those wanting to see restrictions on gun ownership?
So President Biden did issue an executive order last month aimed at increasing background checks for people buying a gun. And a key part is increasing the appropriate use of red flag orders. 19 states and Washington, D.C. have enacted red flag laws, which allow citizens to petition a court to determine whether an individual is dangerous and then to temporarily remove their access to firearms.
Good breakdown there, Courtney and Janae. Thanks so much. And for more on this fact check team topic, including links to their sources of information, you want to scan that QR code you see on your screen or visit us at thenationaldesk.com.
Ahead here on the National Desk, the state pushing for more oversight of district attorneys. Plus, the cost-cutting measure in New York that police say could be putting the community in danger. The National Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America. This week, we start in Maryland, where the state fire marshal is warning there's an increase in fire-related deaths.
A terrible fire in this Lanham home claims the lives of a retired couple days before they're scheduled to leave on a cruise. A smoky fire in a Silver Spring high-rise kills a 25-year-old as she tries to escape, her father distraught. This week, a man in Garrett County dying in this fire. The week before, a couple in St. Mary's losing their lives in this house.
It's out of control.
State Fire Marshal Brian Geraci's job is to investigate and prevent fires statewide. The lives lost, eating him up.
People have died. It doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to happen.
For the first time in a long career, Geraci sending out this open letter to Marylanders, sounding the alarm. There have been nearly 40 fire deaths in the first 3 months of this year, twice last year's count, a spike not seen in decades. He says open floor plans and petroleum-based materials in homes are part of the problem.
They burn much faster, much hotter, and you have less time today than at any other time in history to get out of your house if it catches on fire. Once you do get out, if you do get out, stay out. Don't go back in a burning home. We've already lost 2 people this year that went back into a burning house. You're not going to come out alive. It's just not going to happen.
Now over to Texas, where Republicans in the state legislature are behind 2 bills that would impose new oversight on district attorneys. If passed, DAs who are elected officials could be removed from office if they don't prosecute all criminal offenses. In recent years, some Texas district attorneys have publicly stated they will not seek charges for certain crimes, such as low-level theft, marijuana-related offenses, and abortion-related cases.
There is a perception, empirically valid in some places, not in others, that crime is out of control, particularly in Texas's urban areas, and that prosecutors share part of the blame for that.
Those who oppose the bills, including the ACLU of Texas, say forcing district attorneys out of office would undermine the will of voters who elected them. In New York, Syracuse police say the state should rethink its mugshot policy. In 2020, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's budget included a new law that put a ban on the release of suspect booking photos. That policy is still in place today, and Syracuse police say it could put the community in danger.
At the end of the day, we want the residents of Syracuse to be safe, and I think that we should be able to know who is getting arrested in our communities for committing crimes, so at least we can identify, hey, that's the person that's scamming people.
Right now, each individual police agency in the state makes its own decision on whether to release mugshots. Still ahead, economic expectations. We are breaking down this week's shift in oil production and how it could affect the price you pay at the pump. Plus, the strength of the U.S. dollar. An expert weighs in on if there's any reason to worry. And later, parent pushback. The new legal action against school districts as parents say gender is talked about in the classroom without their permission. Taking a look at your money, JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon believes the global banking crisis could impact Americans' wallets for years to come. Though in a recent letter to shareholders, he said the sudden collapse of several banks are far less dire than the 2008 financial crisis. In the U.S., problems began with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. New York's Signature Bank was closed 2 days later. When First Republic Bank showed signs of trouble, larger banks, including JP Morgan, stepped in with a $30 billion lifeline to avoid another collapse. Now, much of your money is going to fill up the tank. According to AAA, the average price for a gallon of gas rose 7 cents last week to $3.55, and part of that is due to OPEC's plan to cut production by over 1 million barrels per day. While that hasn't happened yet, the announcement is sending the price of crude oil up. Earlier this week, the National Desk's Scott Thuman sat down with former White House economic advisor Steve Moore to get his take on potential gas price spikes, plus the latest on the debt ceiling debate.
Let's first talk about oil prices. They surged after Saudi Arabia announced it was cutting oil production by more than 1 million barrels per day. What does that mean for inflation and then for the average person's bottom dollar?
Well, obviously, it's going to cause higher gas prices. And we saw yesterday the price of oil, the spot price of oil went from $75 to over $80 a barrel. So that's certainly going to translate into probably somewhere in the neighborhood of another 50 cents a gallon in terms of what you pay at the gas pump. And so this is frustrating for a couple of reasons. Number one, in recent weeks on this show, we've been talking about the fact that inflation has been coming down finally, and that's been a good thing. Especially gas prices have come down, but now it looks like they're headed back up north. And so that is going to bring inflation back up. And what does that mean? It puts more pressure on the Fed now to maybe continue to raise interest rates because they've been combating this high inflation for the last year. Now, this is a frustrating situation, by the way. As you know, I worked as an economic advisor to Donald Trump, and one of the issues that I worked on him was energy policy, and our policy was to make America energy independent, even energy dominant. And we didn't talk a lot about OPEC when Trump was president because we were producing so much oil here. So to come to a conclusion to this, if we just had kept with the Trump policy, we'd be producing about 2 million more barrels a day. OPEC has announced they're cutting their production by 1 million barrels a day. It wouldn't have had nearly the impact that it has had if we just kept producing American oil.
All right, I know this part's a little wonky, but I'm confident you can explain it to us in a way everyone will understand and why. India is abandoning the U.S. dollar and it's going to trade with Malaysia in Indian currency instead of the U.S. dollar. And Russia has announced it's working with Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It's part of the BRICS that's the acronym BRICS, to develop a new currency. Is that a reason for us to worry?
A little bit. Look, I still believe the U.S. dollar is going to be the world reserve currency. 60% of the transactions, well more than half of the transactions that happen around the world in global currency happen in dollars. We are the world reserve currency. And your real question is, will we retain that status? Because it's a huge advantage that the world has dollarized. Yeah, there's a slight worry there, although I've always said this, Scott, we're the least rotten apple in the cart. So if there were some kind of economic emergency, what happens every time there's, something like COVID or a world recession? Everybody rushes to buy dollars. So I don't think we're going to give up that world reserve currency. But you know what, Scott, would help a lot if the United States brought its massive debt down, because a lot of foreigners are losing some confidence in the U.S. dollar because of our reckless fiscal policy in Washington.
Sure. Okay. So then from debt to the debt ceiling, it's a fine transition. President Biden and Republicans really at a stalemate here on raising the debt ceiling. Yeah. And for those at home, that's, of course, how much the United States can essentially borrow when we look at our spending.
That's right.
Do you think that lawmakers are going to get a deal done before disaster strikes? It seems we always avert it last minute sometimes, but are you confident that'll happen again? And if not, could the fight itself over the debt ceiling have a real negative impact on the economy, or is it just kind of Chicken Little?
I think it's the latter. I think it's Chicken Little right now. I think that this fight, Scott, is going to go on for another maybe 6 months, actually. I wouldn't be surprised if they, I've been in Washington, D.C. a long time. I've remembered times when these budget fights go to almost Christmas Eve before they finally come to a resolution. I do believe it's really critical that we make a deal here that leads to a balanced budget. Joe Biden's position is just give me an unlimited credit card and let me borrow and borrow and borrow and spend. I think that's incredibly irresponsible. So that right now it's looking like a Mexican standoff. But I think at the end of the day, Biden is going to have to negotiate, because it's very simple. You talk about a financial crisis. The financial crisis happens if we continue to borrow $1.5 to $2 trillion a year and plunge ourselves deeper, deeper, and deeper into debt.
Yeah, and I feel like we probably could have played this interview a year ago or a year from today, and it would apply.
Here we go again.
Fight.
Right?
Yeah, it's just Washington being Washington. Hey, thanks so much for being here, Steve. We appreciate your insight on this otherwise pretty heady topic.
Yeah, right. Have a great day, Scott. Take care.
And still ahead here on the National Desk, the stories making headlines next week, from a new announcement about where the president's traveling to next to the latest on the violent attack of Paul Pelosi. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. Looking ahead to stories making headlines this week, President Biden is set to visit the United Kingdom to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Accord. The U.S. helped broker the agreement, which ended decades-long sectarian violence in Northern Ireland. Then on Wednesday, David DePape, the man accused of attacking Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul, is set to appear in court. That hearing will be set at a date for his trial. Now, also next week, Wednesday and Thursday, we'll get new numbers for the consumer and producer price indices. The Fed's next rate hike meeting is now set for May 2nd and 3rd. Some parents are pushing back against school districts. They say teachers are talking to students about gender identity without their permission. Some of that frustration boiling over into legal action. The National Desk, Kayla Gaskins, reports on the crisis in the classroom.
At school board meetings, parents are taking a stand.
The number one stakeholder of this is the parents.
This Idaho mom is just one of many parents across the country outraged over teachers speaking with students about gender identity, and in some cases, deliberately hiding information about a child's gender identity, putting parents in the dark. Some parents are making a statement at the ballot box.
I'm with my wife. We're coming after your jobs if this isn't taken care of.
But others are taking school districts to court. Parents recently filing lawsuits in Maine and Wisconsin over policies they claim allow teachers to help students with gender transitions without parental consent. In Pennsylvania, 3 parents are in a legal battle with a school district after a first-grade teacher allegedly taught 6- and 7-year-olds about gender transitions.
Parents are the people who care and love that child the most. They're responsible for that child, and parents should be included in these conversations and in these decisions.
Parents Defending Education is a nonprofit that helps sue school districts when parents feel their rights have been violated. They say schools need to do a better job of respecting parents' decisions about how to raise their children.
We know from our polling that pushing gender ideology in schools is incredibly unpopular with parents, and that's across the political spectrum, that's across the economic spectrum, and that's for both sexes too.
In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Ahead in our next half hour, the first words from the heroic team of officers who responded to the Covenant School shooting. Why one officer says the team stepped past a victim to get to the shooter first. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back.
The National Desk, America's News Now.
Hunter Biden's business dealings, the new details this week involving Ukrainian oil and Biden's time as vice president. Plus, securing schools, what one legal expert is saying about the obligation to keep students and teachers safe. And later, arraignment aftermath. Our D.C. bureau has the latest on the Trump indictment, plus what we know about the prosecutor in the case. From the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and investigations into President Biden's son Hunter are still looming over his administration. Now there's a new layer in Hunter Biden's business dealings. A Ukrainian gas company Hunter was a board member of may have benefited from assistance from the U.S. while Joe Biden was serving as vice president. The National Desk, Christine Frizzell, takes a look.
Then Vice President Joe Biden on the ground in Kyiv, Ukraine on April 21st, 2014, one of several visits he made to the region that year.
Thank you for welcoming me once again. This is my third trip in the last 7 months. You must be getting tired of seeing me.
It was a tenuous time for the country since Russia had invaded Crimea. But there are new questions about the timing and what came out of that April visit. From the notes of a background press briefing aboard Air Force Two, reporters were told Vice President Biden planned to discuss medium and long-term strategies to boost conventional gas production and also to begin to take advantage of the unconventional gas reserves that are in Ukraine. Also discussed at that day's White House press briefing.
He'll also be consulting on the latest developments in eastern Ukraine and on steps to enhance Ukraine's short and long-term energy security.
Energy security, as it turns out, was part of a $1 billion economic assistance package from the United States. Just 3 weeks later, the Ukrainian gas company Burisma announced Biden's son Hunter was brought on to the board of directors, raising questions by some about a conflict of interest.
But I'm wondering if the State Department has any concerns or any thoughts about the vice president's son joining the board of directors of this Ukrainian gas company.
No, he's a private citizen.
But critics say it's not that clear-cut.
When Joe Biden, as vice president of the United States, is speaking into energy policy in Ukraine, he is essentially directly helping his son and his son's employer.
Hunter Biden's business dealings are currently under investigation by the Department of Justice. But these new revelations will likely draw the attention of House Republicans who've been working to tie Joe Biden directly to those same business deals. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
New details on the war in Ukraine. The U.S. is sending a new $2.6 billion military aid package to Ukraine that brings the total U.S. assistance to more than $35 billion since Russia invaded Ukraine in February of last year. Meantime, Finland is now officially part of the NATO military alliance. The country applied to become a member a few months after Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine. The officers who responded to the deadly shooting at a Asheville elementary school shared their story publicly for the first time this week. They described entering the school and walking towards the sound of gunfire.
Doing what our training tells us to do in those situations and following the stimulus. All of us stepped over a victim. I, to this day, don't know how I did that morally, but training is what kicked in.
Police say 28-year-old Audrey Hale shot and killed 3 children and 3 adults at the Covenant School on March 27th. They say Hale fired 152 rounds during the attack before being killed by police. The Murdaugh family back in the spotlight this week after the death of Buster Murdaugh's classmate was officially ruled a homicide. The National Desk Scott Thuman sat down with trial attorney Karen Conti to get her take on the investigation.
So the body of Stephen Smith, and this is a teenager who was found dead in 2015 near the home of convicted murderer Alex Murdaugh, has been exhumed and an autopsy performed. Why are investigators looking at his death again?
The initial autopsy cited the cause of death as undetermined, and there were suspicious circumstances. It looked like a car accident because he was found in the middle of the road, but police at the scene didn't think it was such a crime. It might have been a crime because of the way the evidence was laid out. There was no debris, the clothing was not disheveled, and the injuries were not consistent with a car accident. So the mother got an order to exhume the body, to re-examine the body, to maybe come up with a cause of death that's more definitive and then continue an investigation into seeing what really happened to her son.
Well, how difficult is it? We're talking 8 years later. How hard is it for investigators for an autopsy to come up with some results that would lead them to a different conclusion?
It's not as difficult as you would think. Obviously, the soft tissue is deteriorated, but the bones stay pretty much intact. And the two people who did this examination, a forensic pathologist and an anthropologist, concluded that they got what they needed. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to see a report that talks about maybe a cause of death. And then after that is done, I would imagine that this investigation is going to reopen and continue into what happened to this young man.
Yeah, and determine if there is any connection at all to the Murdaugh family, although that's still yet to be put out there. Let's move on to Virginia. Abby Zwerner, a 25-year-old teacher, was shot by her 6-year-old student in school. She's now sued Newport News School District for $40 million. Pretty a shocking story when this all happened. What are the allegations, and what is a school's legal obligation to keep teachers safe?
A school has an absolute obligation to keep teachers and students safe. And with the number of school shootings, that duty gets higher because the school is on notice that these things are happening. And in this case, the allegations are pretty outrageous. This little boy had trouble. That day, there were 3 sightings of a gun. He had been kicked out of school. He had sexually assaulted another student and had attacked and strangled a teacher. So with all of those facts, there should have been things in place to protect this teacher and the students as well. I see this as being a very viable lawsuit, unfortunately, for the school.
And we talked about this story last week, but Stanford University law students heckled a conservative judge, and now some conservative judges are boycotting the hiring of Stanford students. Is there anything illegal about that or discriminatory? As a professor yourself, have you ever heard of anything like this? Does it set a precedent?
Yeah, there's nothing illegal about that. And I've seen law firms boycott hiring certain law students from different schools. I don't like this whole thing. The judges have a right to say we don't want to hire from schools that allow disruptive students to interfere with speeches that judges are giving, for free. So this is not a good precedent to be set. I think Stanford, if I were the dean there, I would issue an apology to the judges, to all judges, and implement rules that students who do not agree with the conservative judges who come there there's a procedure. They raise their hand, they confront the judge in an orderly fashion, and do not commit disorderly conduct. I think that would be the best thing here for everyone.
Yeah, seems like more problems continue after that initial incident. All right, well, Karen Conti, thanks so much for joining us here on the National Desk. We always appreciate it.
Sure.
According to a new survey by Go Banking Rates, nearly 1 in 3 Americans are worried about losing their jobs this year. Earlier this week, I talked with the fact-check team. They investigated the potential impact of AI on the workforce. According to a ZipRecruiter survey, 62% of people looking for a job said they're worried artificial intelligence could replace their jobs. But not everyone is convinced this is all doom and gloom for workers. I'm with the fact-check team, and Connor, starting with you, you found AI could actually add jobs.
Yeah, it sounds surprising, but that's right, Dee Dee. In fact, a 2020 report from the World Economic Forum says it could lead to long-term job growth. The report stated that while 85 million jobs would be replaced by AI, like automation and machines, they estimated 97 million new jobs would be created by 2025.
And why all of these predictions that it will add jobs in the long run?
Well, it's because there's going to be a bigger demand for human workers to help the world adapt to a larger AI presence. And if you think about it this way, we've really been here before with the rapid expansion of technology. A report from MIT even found that 60% of the jobs that we have today didn't exist a generation ago because of technology's impact on evolving the workforce.
And that all makes sense, but Courtney, there's still potential for this to disrupt the workforce. I mean, some jobs more at risk than others, right?
That's right, Dee Dee. Every job will be impacted or transformed, but a Goldman Sachs report said that administrative workers, lawyers, and engineers are some of the jobs expected to be the most affected, compared to the, quote, little effect seen on physically demanding or outdoor jobs like construction or repair work. The bottom line is AI will disrupt, but not totally destroy the workforce.
All right, a great breakdown there. And for more on this fact-check team topic, just scan that QR code on your screen or head over to our website, thenationaldesk.com. Ahead here on the National Desk, driving dilemma, why a new law meant to save lives behind the wheel has some drivers worried police could abuse their power. Plus, content controversy, the debate over which books should be allowed in school libraries. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. Our team of nearly 4,000 local journalists bring you the headlines from coast to coast. From a vending machine that could save lives in D.C. to a debate over books in Texas schools. We're taking the pulse of America, starting with a new Ohio law to crack down on distracted driving.
People who are actually looking at their phone, using their phone while they're driving, they might as well have a blindfold on.
The Ohio State Highway Patrol reported that in 2022, distracted driving accounted for 31 fatal and 258 serious injury crashes.
When we see you now looking, texting, doing things on your phone, we can now stop you just for that reason.
Dialing a number to sending a text or browsing social media and watching videos, anything involving a phone in hand is now illegal, with a few exceptions, like calling 911.
You can hold a phone up to your ear as long as you were stopped.
Many are asking, how will officers know for certain someone was using their phone?
Well, they can make a statement to the officer if they don't believe they were using it. But ultimately, if the officer says, you know, I saw you use it, then it's going to have to be decided by a judge.
We gotta keep people alive so that we can get them into recovery.
A free vending machine outside the firehouse at M and Half Street Southwest will dispense Narcan to combat overdose deaths, plus a variety of other products, from fentanyl and COVID detectors to condoms.
You can walk up to the machine, you can call our phone number and follow a prompt that will immediately issue a code that you can use to vend out of the machine.
Fentanyl-involved opioid deaths are the main concerns. They have soared from 83 in 2014 to 422 in 21, 448 last year.
You know that K2 stuff that they smoke?
Right.
They got fentanyl in that. They got fentanyl in weed. They got fentanyl in dope. They got fentanyl in everything.
You want to give them a shot in the nose. If they still don't respond, you want to give them a second one.
The machines are going up outside 3 firehouses, a pilot program that is expected to expand.
It's free. No ID or prescription required.
Republican lawmakers in the House are looking to ban books that have, quote, sexually explicit content in their pages.
I would view that as an incredible win for the students of the state to not have that material in the library.
Frisco Republican Representative Jared Patterson is the author of House Bill 900. He says this isn't about sexual orientation, creed, color, or religion. But he says it's about not allowing students access to content that is sexually explicit.
Sexually explicit is Texas legal code for LGBTQIA books.
81% of all the books that were banned in the U.S. had LGBTQ plus themes or significant characters of color.
Our Texas lawmakers are putting so much effort in taking away books.
San Antonio parent Bo Carrington says he agrees with the restriction, but he also says
put a book into a rating system that restricts its access, put it behind the counter, and a student can't access that book without parental permission.
Still to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from the indictment of former President Donald Trump to the current recession risk.
And welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day to report on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. The Bureau's correspondents are here with their insights on the stories they've been covering. History made this past week, former President Trump becoming the first president or former president to be charged in a criminal case. Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg's indictment contained 34 counts alleging Trump illegally tried to affect the 2016 presidential campaign when he paid hush money to 3 people to cover up alleged sexual affairs. National correspondent Christine Frizzau, the overwhelming consensus, even from Trump's detractors, is that this is a pretty weak case.
Yeah, this was interesting, Steve. We, of course, expected his supporters to rally to his defense when this indictment was unsealed. What we didn't expect is people like John Bolton, longtime critics of the former president, to say this case is even weaker than I thought. So you talk about these 34 counts. Lawyers that I spoke to said it's going to actually be pretty easy to prove that the hush money was paid and that the documents, these financial records, were falsified. But those are misdemeanors. The thing that makes these counts felony charges is showing that he tried to violate federal election law. And this is going to be problematic for a couple different reasons. First of all, because you're going to need some pretty hard evidence. I don't know if there's recordings or something in which the former president actually said, you know, I need to do this for the election. Right now, we don't have any of that. So that's going to be difficult. The other thing is this federal election law is not in the jurisdiction of District Attorney Alvin Bragg. So showing how he can do that, that's going to be interesting. So we're going to keep our eye on that.
And Trump and his backers alleging politics is the reason for Bragg's case. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, what do we know about Bragg?
Right. So Alvin Bragg now quickly becoming a household name across the country. He ran for office in 2021 as a criminal justice reformer. He often gets lumped in with the progressive prosecutor bunch, people that got into office with money by progressive George Soros. So critics now digging into his record. What has he done so far while he's been in office? Well, his office has so far downgraded felonies to misdemeanors about 52% of the time. So his critics come after him as someone who is soft on crime. But not everybody in New York gets leniency. So he's also getting criticism for who he decides to go after. There was a very high-profile, controversial case of a bodega worker last year who was charged with murder in what was pretty clearly, by some standards, a self-defense case of someone who went behind the counter and started attacking the bodega worker. He then stabbed him, and then the bodega worker was charged with murder. So we got a lot of criticism there. We had something similar happen with a parking attendant just last week. So critics are saying he is soft on criminals and tough on victims and trying to lump that in with going after Donald Trump. But Alvin Bragg did run as someone not afraid to go after Trump. He was very clear on that for the campaign trail. So we can see this as him staying in line with essentially what he promised the people of Manhattan. Steve.
And shifting to the economy, of course, top of mind for most Americans. National correspondent Atra Elnishar, growing concern about the risk of a recession.
Right. This week we saw a few instances of weaker than expected jobs numbers. And remember, this is the part where the Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes start to show their effects. And that can be really unsettling, despite the fact that they're by design. So the question is, will this add to a recession? How far will these job declines go? Now, keep in mind, there is still an immense labor shortage that's adding to inflation. There's still 1.7 open jobs for every person looking for work. But still, people are uneasy because the jobs market is arguably the strongest pillar of the U.S. economy. So this week we heard the head of the IMF tell central bankers stay the course as long as those financial stressors are manageable, and right now the Fed believes they are.
As always, a lot going on in Washington, and Atra, Kayla, Christine, thank you all for being on top of it every week. Dee Dee, back to you.
Interesting discussion coming up here on the National Desk. Dating dilemma. A Spotlight on America investigation looks into who is being targeted on apps and simple ways to protect yourself. New details on a warning for people looking for love online. A new study reveals troubling trends in sexual assaults related to meeting people on dating apps. Spotlight on America's national investigative reporter Angie Moreski takes a closer look at who's being targeted and what's being done about it.
Online dating is one of the most common ways people meet each other today, and while a swipe to the right can hold the promise of someone special, it's important to keep your guard up.
All of our findings really indicate to us that violent sexual predators use dating apps as hunting grounds for vulnerable victims.
Dr. Julie Valentine of Brigham Young University in Utah conducted the first major study of its kind looking at the relationship between dating apps and sexual assaults.
What we found is incredibly concerning. We found that these rapes were much more violent. A third of the victims were strangled.
An hours-long standoff.
Several recent cases in the news highlight the concerns, including an Oregon man who went on the run after police say he tortured a woman and was using dating apps to find potential victims.
He was throwing me into the walls.
A Michigan woman kidnapped for 3 weeks and brutally beaten by a man she met on a dating app.
2 alleged victims here.
And in Maryland, a man accused of terrorizing, raping, and robbing men he allegedly lured through a popular dating app. The study found in cases reviewed there were twice as many male victims of sexual assault when they met through dating apps rather than acquaintances. And predators appeared to target vulnerable users. 60% of victims self-reported mental illness. Dating apps are especially popular with young people, and the study found college students were more likely to be victims of dating app-related assaults.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty horrible.
It's terrifying. It really is.
Spotlight on America talked with students at American University in our nation's capital. Libby Eaglin is a grad student and says she has seen red flags at times.
Or them getting offended that you would rather meet them at a location than them actually picking you up from your house or something.
The potential for deception is also noted as an added risk.
It's the fact that it can literally be anybody.
There are calls for dating app companies to do more to protect users, and following this BYU study, Utah just passed a new law to do just that.
We wanted to start this beginning process about awareness and holding dating apps accountable.
Utah Representative Angelo Romero sponsored the legislation, which will now require dating apps in Utah to warn users if they don't do background checks on members, notify users when an account is suspected of using a false identity or engaging in fraud, and clearly post resources for safety awareness and reporting sexual assaults. The message, not to stop using dating apps, but to be aware of potential risks. Be careful and keep your guard up.
Will do.
We did reach out to several dating app companies for comment. The Match Group, which owns Tinder, Hinge, Plenty of Fish, and Match, responded quickly. They told us they've made a lot of investments in safety features over the past several years. We'll have more on that and other safety information for you at SpotlightInvestigates.com. I'm Angie Moreski for Spotlight on America.
One last look at your money. Google is testing a price guarantee program to get rid of buyer's remorse when it comes to booking flights. Listen to this. Here's how it works. You input your travel dates and destination on Google Flights. When you find the trip that works best for you, book it. Google then monitors the price every day until departure. If the fare goes down, you get the price difference back via Google Pay. For this pilot program, the guarantee only applies to travel that departs from within the U.S., and you have to book it on Google. And that is going to do it for us on the weekend edition of the National Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings, and you can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next week.